Hello and welcome to part 2 of my video series relating to my iOptron CEM120 EC mount. Now if you saw my first video, the unboxing video, you'll know that I was very impressed. My first impressions of this mount were exceptionally good. Well, that's not changed. My impressions are still very good. I've got to learn my way around it now, the differences between this and standard mounts, of which there's quite a few, and I'm still suitably impressed. The way it works, the way it operates is very good. Because of the differences, I thought the best way to approach this whole thing would be to do a series of shorter videos. There's quite a lot to learn on the mount, so I thought if we do a series of shorter videos on key parts at key stages of the way to getting it up and running and imaging with it, it will be easier to follow. The key thing that I wanted to go over in this particular video is the mechanical switches and the gear engagement, because if you get that wrong you can damage the mount. It's quite straightforward, it's very intuitive actually, but it is very different. You need to make sure that these switches are engaged in the right way, so we'll run over that. I also want to go over the firmware, because from the factory you need a firmware update. Obviously it's a pretty new mount out on the market, so they're updating the firmware fairly quickly. So we'll run over again how to do the firmware updates, which is it's different. You do it differently from the mount to the handset. The mount you can do via USB or LAN, the handset you can't, you have to do that differently. You will need to either use the supplied USB to serial cable. If you don't have a serial port on your computer or your laptop, you'll need an adapter. Or, as I have done, somebody recommended to me some leads that are on Amazon. I'll put the link down below that you can get that work perfectly. They plug into the handset straight into USB on your laptop, and that's great. That worked perfectly. I also wanted to run over the initial setting up of the encoders, setting the 0 point and then calibrating. You don't, I believe, need to do that on the non-EC version, but on the EC version with the encoders, the shaft encoders, once you've done a firmware update you need to calibrate the encoder and then you can set the 0 point. One of the things that they've done in the latest update on the firmware, for example, is that the park position can be different to the 0 position. That's quite handy, because the 0 position would always be, say, this position if you need to get back to where, if everything's lost and you want to get back to a set position. But then if you want to park, if your observatory roof is low, for example, you can park in a horizontal position. So that's quite a good feature. So we'll go over this and we'll do the very first thing, the most important thing, which is these mechanical switches. Right, the very first thing that I want to go over in this particular part of this review is the mechanical lock and the gear engagement switches on this mount. It's very unique to iOptron, and it has potential to cause damage if you get it wrong. Now the thing to remember is that these switches here should always be in the same orientation. You should never be in a position where you've got this, because this is going to possibly cause damage, because you'll have the shaft mechanically locked, but you'll also have the gears engaged. This way you'll see that the little legend on the top there shows that the shaft is unlocked, and you'll see here that the gearbox is engaged. If I disengage the gearbox, I can now rotate the shaft freely, and I can then lock the shaft by doing this. So this is just keeping the shaft in locked position but without the gears engaged. So if I want to slew or balance the scope, then I'll unlock the shaft, do that. Once I'm happy, and you'll see these are in this position, so you're not going to be able to drive it, I can then engage my gearbox, and that's it. I'm now in a position ready to run the mount. If I now do that, I can lock the shaft again now, and you'll see the gears are engaged. So if I try to drive the mount now, it's going to cause damage. So always have them in this orientation. That actually goes the same for the declination axis as well as the RA axis. They're both exactly the same, both got the same legends, and that's how that works. Okay, the next thing we're going to need to do is go to the ioptron.com website, go to the CEM120 page, and then click on the Support Documents tab, and we can then install the ASCOM driver and Commander 6 software. So just click on that hyperlink, that will take you off to a page with various bits of software, including instruction manuals and so on. And at this point, all that we want to do is to download and install the Commander software and the ASCOM driver installer. Well, we're now at the point of connecting to the mount for the first time, switching on and setting up and getting the 0 point set and so on. Now with the mount itself, as part of the kit is supplied a RS232 lead, so you can connect this just to the RS232 port on the mount and then to an RS232 port on your computer. Now, as mentioned, not many PCs or laptops now are actually supplied with an RS232 port, so the likelihood is you are either going to need an adapter if you're going to use RS232, so you need an RS232 to USB adapter, or as I have done is purchased just a USB lead with the FTDI chipset. So this is from Amazon. I've linked it below. It works really well. I bought 2 different lengths. I didn't know what length I was going to need, and they actually do work quite well, so it's worth getting them. Obviously you can connect to the mount via USB, via wired LAN, or via wireless, so Wi-Fi, so it's entirely up to you. The only reason I'm connecting RS232 is because I thought that I actually needed RS232 to do the firmware on the mount. You don't. You can do that through USB. You do need the RS232 lead to do the firmware on the handset. But as I had the lead anyway, I thought, well, I'll use that instead of USB. So that's how I'm connected to the mount now. So we'll switch on and I'll show you over the initial setup routine that we need to do. Now, point of note, before we switch on for the first time, make absolutely certain that you have the gear and shaft lock switches in this orientation, so that the worm gear is engaged but the shaft is unlocked. Don't, whatever you do, switch it on with that in this position, because you can cause damage. As you will have seen in my unboxing video, the mount itself does come with a 5 amp switch mode power supply. Now, it's up to you if you use that supply or not. It's quite adequate for the mount, and it's designed specifically to power the mount and nothing else. It seems to be a reasonably good quality power supply. I tend to use a regulated bench power supply, so I probably won't be using this, but you know, it is reasonably good and there's no reason why it can't be used. It actually just plugs straight into the mount at the bottom there and controls or powers only the mount. The input for the main power to drive your peripherals is in the center part here, and then that links directly to the outputs on the dovetail plate. So we're all plugged in now. We're ready to switch on for the first time. So we just push the on-off switch on the bottom of the mount and we power up. Obviously, as mentioned previously, make sure that your shaft locks are off, because if the mount should happen to slew, you certainly don't want it slewing against the mechanical locks. So when you switch on for the first time, this is what comes up, the main splash screen. I apologise if the view that we got here isn't that good. It's as good as I could get. So the very first thing you'll probably want to do is that from the factory, the display isn't really that easy to see. So if you go to push the menu button, go down to settings, push enter, go to display settings, and then push the right hand button, and that turns the contrast up. So it just makes things much easier to see. To save the setting, push enter, and that's it. So it just means that the settings are a lot easier to see. The next thing that you want to do is to set the time and the site. Now, you can use the supplied GPS module and plug that in, and that will pick up your site and time. But for the purposes of this video, I'll show you how to do it manually. So you just get to set time and site, push enter, and then you'll see that the yes and no is flashing on a daylight saving. At the moment we're on yes, but we can change that. Just push the down arrow, change that to no. and then you push the right arrow to go along to the next menu. So UTC time plus 60 minutes, which is where we are at the moment. If you want to change, you just push the down arrow or the up arrow accordingly, and then move along to the next figure. Obviously the date, again, is the same. If you want to change the date, just push up and down and then move along. The current time, again the same way. Your longitude and latitude, exactly the same again. You just push up and down to set where you want. Once you're happy that everything's set, push enter. Enter saves everything. Don't just push the back button. If you push the back button, it will be in there, but it won't save it. Push enter, and that's it. You're back down. So for checking your version of firmware that's in your mount, if from the main menu here, when you first switch on, if you push the menu button, if you go down to firmware information, push enter, and this will give you all the firmwares for the hand controller, for the main mount, for the RA and the declination encoders, and the main star catalog. You can check this firmware against what's on the iOptron site. They'll give you the latest firmware there. Now what we need to do is go back to the iOptron website, to the CEM120 page, scroll down to the support documents tab again, and this time we're going to go to the download the latest firmware hyperlink. Now that opens up a new page again with all the relevant links to the various software, including the iOptron upgrade utility. Now you will need to download and install that as a separate little application. That's for installing all the firmware on the handset and the main mount. Now the mount firmware actually comes in two different packages. It comes in the firmware package, which is for the mount and the encoders, and it also comes with a separate hand controller firmware package. So you need to download both of these and install the two packages separately using the upgrade utility. So once you've downloaded the package, click save, and we're then going to go and open the folder where it is, and then you can see there it's downloaded as a .bin file. I just keep mine in my downloads folder until I've actually run the utility. So we click on the upgrade utility and you'll see it's automatically connected to COM port 11. It should pick up your mount automatically without a problem. Click on browse and it will now find your .bin file, which is your firmware package file. As you see, mine was in the downloads folder, but you can keep it in whichever folder you want. Click open and that will now check the version of the firmware in the package. Now you can install the firmware separately. You can do the main board, the RA board, or the deck board, or in most cases you're just going to click on intelligent select, and that will choose itself which firmware needs updating. Click upgrade and it will go through the upgrade process. I've previously done mine, so it's already updated to the latest version, but if it's not, it will show the old version and the new version, and then just do all the upgrade and go through the process fully automatically. What we're going to do now is we're going to download the handset firmware, and then we'll run through the updating of the handset firmware package. Right, to update the firmware on the hand controller, we don't do this via the USB port or the RS232 port on the mount. We need to make sure that the mount is powered down. You can use the same cable, so disconnect the RS232 cable from the mount and take the RJ9 plug and then plug it into the bottom of your hand controller in the other port. Your hand controller still needs to be connected to the mount for this to take place. To reiterate, all that is done with the power to the mount off. So once you've done that, you're connected, and then we switch the mount on. Now when we power the mount on to do the firmware upgrade, as we power the mount on, we need to hold the enter button. If you don't hold the enter button, it won't enter into firmware upgrade mode. So hold the enter button at the same time, press the power on button, and the mount now, or the handset, goes into upgrading mode, update mode. So you see now it shows up version 2 BIOS, chip size, and it says upgrading mode connecting. So what we do now is we go back to our PC, we open up our upgrade utility. Again, we're automatically connected. We click browse, and now we're going to find our hand controller firmware that we downloaded. Double click on that, and it shows the files verified, file version, and it shows there that it is the hand controller firmware. Click upgrade. This is connecting, it's initializing, you see it all upgrading on the handset. And this is now updating to the latest version of the hand controller firmware. It doesn't take too long. I mean, obviously, again, it's dependent on the PC that you're using, but it is generally a minute or so. Hand controller has been successfully upgraded, all done. So that's that. That's the hand controller now on the latest version of software. Now the last thing that we need to do to completely finish the upgrade process, if you run the EC version like I do, or the EC2 version, you need to recalibrate the encoders. So the way we do this is we power the mount down. So once the handset firmware is done, power the mount down. Whilst we power the mount up this time, remember last time we pushed enter, this time we're going to push and hold 2. So we hold 2 down, power up the mount, and we keep 2 down until the mount starts the calibration process. So that now has started the calibration process, and what it will do is it will slew all the way to the east side. Once it gets there, it will stop. And then it goes on slow. We'll go on slow all the way over now to the west side of the mount. This doesn't take long. The whole calibration process takes a couple of minutes. Now you will need to do this in both axes if you have the EC2 version. I just have the EC version, so I only have the RA encoder. If you have the EC2 version, you do exactly the same process as you do with this one, so holding number 2 while you turn the mount on. But for the second axis, for the declination axis encoder, you hold number 4 whilst you turn the encoder on. So you do this calibration first on the RA axis, you turn the mount off. Once it's complete, you start it again whilst holding number 4. But once this calibration is finished, as I say, it takes a minute or so. It goes all the way over to the west side now on slow, and then it knows where it is. And that's that. So once the calibration is done, you power off the mount, and that's finished. Once you turn the mount back on now, we're all back in normal use. What we'll do while we've got the mount all connected is we'll open up the commander, and you'll see here the mount's connected. It will automatically or should automatically find your mount. I've certainly not had any issues with the leads that I bought from Amazon or on USB. I tried it on USB as well. I've not tried LAN. I'm not sure that I would run it on LAN. You can, I mean, that's not an issue, but because my PC is mounted in my observatory, it's easy to connect to the RS-232. So that will show mount connected. You click on the mount panel and it will open up the main mount panel. What you can do from this initial start screen is you can check the firmware of all your main board, the RA board, the deck board and the hand controller. You can check this against what's available on iOptron's site, and it will tell you if you need to update the firmware. You can also check the communication status, shows you if you've got any drop packages and so on. But on here, the one thing that I wanted to show you is the part position, which is quite a new addition on the firmware, is that you can set your part position to wherever you like. So if I go change my slew rate to maximum, I'll just slew to a random position. So we'll go, let's say that I've got a low roof on my observatory, so I want to park my mount somewhere across towards horizontal so it clears. I can then click on the park button, choose the current position, save that parking position, and that's it. Right, well I think that's about it for this particular video. Hopefully it's been useful if you've got one of these mounts. I think when you get a new mount, particularly one like this, which is a little bit different to the norm, if you like, it can be a bit daunting doing new firmware updates and so on. So hopefully this has shown you that it's actually relatively straightforward. In the next video I'm going to put the mount on the pier and start connecting the PC and the cabling up, the through cables. I've actually got a pole master, so I'm going to buy the little adapter kit that I do for this particular mount and show you that being fitted and so on. And we'll start using the mount, get the telescopes fitted, everything connected up, and show you how it works. So hopefully it's been useful, and I will see you in the next video. In the meantime, take care. Bye.